Welcome back to the Bluegrass. This beautiful July afternoon. We're over at the farm. We're out in the sunflower field, and we're going to do a little bit of hiking and a little bit of canoeing, a little bit of swimming. But before we get to any of that kind of fun stuff, what we're going to do is work with Henry, the field-bred Labrador Retriever puppy, on being able to stay still in the sunflower field, right? His dad's going to take him dove hunting this year. He's going to be a young pup, so we don't expect much out of him in the way of retrieving, but we really want him to have super good manners so he's welcome back on every hunt, okay? So my cast of characters today, of course, I have No Name, and he's going to be the mentor dog for the day. I have Bunsen. I have Cash, nice German short-haired pointer puppy. He's a distraction and hiker for the day. I have Bunsen, who's my little buddy. He's an ace hiker, ace distraction. And then I have Henry. Now Henry is the one that's at boarding school today. He's the one that has to sit out here and be still for a long time while we do retrieving and while we walk around the field and move all the equipment around. My buddy's going to be out here doing some mowing. And so out of all the dogs, basically this is how life works out, right? Sometimes your friends get to do all the fun stuff and you have to do all the boring stuff, and that is Henry's lot in life today. All right, so I'm going to finish getting these dogs out. We'll show you a little bit of our dummy launcher work, and then we'll head over to the pond. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is take a little walk around the field, because the first thing you do when you're hunting is get out of the truck and take off walking, right? And as I'm walking, I'm going to be carrying the shotgun, get the dogs used to seeing the shotgun, and then I'm going to have George ride past us a few times on the ATV. So basically, I'm just going to take off walking, and what I expect is for the dogs to kind of come with me. They don't have to stay right by my side or anything. I want them to run around and explore and get used to being out and making decisions on their own. Okay? I really don't mind for the dogs to be out investigating some stuff as long as they don't get too far from me. One of the things that you'll notice sometimes is if people walk by you or the ATV or side-by-side goes by you, then the dogs want to go off and chase it. That gives you a perfect chance to practice calling them back before you're actually in a real-life situation, guys. So you want to get out and practice all these situations well in advance of the first time you take your dog hunting. Very good dogs. Oh, that's good babies. Very good dogs. You're a good boy, Henry. You're a good boy, Bunsen. So notice I see George coming up with the ATV, so I'm going to kind of move over to the other side of the lane. Come on. Of course, I'm a friendly person, so I'm going to wave. Watch out, nerd, with that big stick. Put that down, dude. Every so often, I'm just going to stop. Come on, dogs. Come on. Oh, my gosh. Very good. Just call them back. I don't want anything in particular other than them to come and check in. In this walk, we're trying to accomplish a couple of different things. On the one hand, I want to make sure that Henry is a little bit tired when I start asking him to stay and using the dummy launcher. Okay, it's always easier if you're working on behaviors that require a dog to be patient, to be still, it's always best to run them a little bit, because there's an inverse relationship between exercise and any kind of impulsive or anxious behavior, right? So like if you're working on fetching, then you want to get your dog right out of the truck and like work on your fetching while they're full of energy, okay? But if you're working on manners, it's really a good idea to run them quite a bit, let them get tired, let them get used to the environment, and then work on their staying. And then later on, when their fetching is good and their staying is really good, then you can start to combine them, okay? But I like to kind of use active motivators with active behavior, right? And a dog is full of energy. And then I use kind of passive motivators for passive behaviors like staying, and I like to use a dog that's had a lot of its energy run out of it. Now, one of the main things that we have to do here, let me swing around this way, cameraman, is although we're primarily interested in how Henry is going to behave on these mowed lanes and around the sunflower field itself, okay? But this, I feel like, is a big mistake that people make, is they neglect to get the proper amount of socialization on the edges of the field that need to be bush hogged and in the wood line. Okay, and then so kind of what ends up happening, if you come out here and you work on obedience or you work on retrieving, but you do it all on the mowed area and you never go off in the creek, if you never go off in the wood line, if you never let your dog go into the areas that haven't been bush hogged lately, okay, then what's going to happen is those areas are going to kind of provide what some people refer to as suction. In other words, since the dog doesn't have much interest with those areas, then they're going to be like really wondering what's over there, okay? So even though I'm primarily concerned with this dog being able to come out here and be calm, attentive, and polite on the edge of the sunflower field, I have to give them some time over here in this area, okay, close to the wood line, so that they are not wondering what's over here, okay? And this applies to everything, guys. Like, you know, they'll come over here, because when we get to the sunflower field, like, we are always seeing different kinds of critters run over here into the wood line, especially deer. And, you know, dogs, of course, like to chase deer. So I get right off of the side-by-side and make a trip around the field. And what I'm doing, again, I'm getting rid of some of that energy, okay? And then when I feel like their energy is at a manageable level, I move over here and I finish my walk by walking along the wood line. And if I don't have the cameraman with me, I just go on off in the woods and walk down that little gully there. I'm really just trying to take all of the novelty out of the environment, okay? I mean, people are always thinking about, you know, having dogs like be good off the leash by telling them what not to do. You know, like, hey dog, if you run off, I'm gonna zap you, or something like that. But the reality is that usually if you're out in the field and you're doing something pretty interesting, if the dog moves away from you, it's just because they feel like there's something more interesting out there, right? So I just take a walk and I say, look, here's what's out here. And I feel like I'm the most interesting thing in the environment. You're welcome to go do some other stuff. And after I let them go do a few things, after I let them get off in the creek and get off in the pond and run around, chase a few squirrels, chase a few rabbits a little ways, then they're like a kid at an amusement park. They're much easier to manage. And you'll notice, like right now, nobody's trying to run away from me. Now, there is a caveat to that. This works really well at the proper developmental stage, right? So if you have a dog that's 2 or 3 years old and doesn't want to stay close to you and doesn't have much in the way of environmental socialization, and you just come to the field and head over to the wood line, you're liable to lose that dog for a little while. So this advice does not apply across the board. You know, it's really mainly directed towards those of you who have young dogs in their formative developmental stages. All right, now we're going to come out of this brushy area just because I have the cameraman following me and it makes it hard to hold the camera. Without the camera getting hit on the bushes. Okay, so I have 2 dogs with me. Let's see if I can round up some more. All right, well, I have broken a good sweat and I have run a lot of excitement out of these dogs. And so now we're gonna head back over here to the side-by-side and we're gonna grab the dummy launcher. And we're going to get to work on making Henry learn that sometimes he has to be still when like exciting things are going on in the environment, right? Now, remember I told you from the other video, like when you're raising a young retriever that you plan on taking hunting, it's you kind of almost have conflicting goals. On the one hand, you want them to get really excited about the prospect of being able to go into situations where they can retrieve, but on the other hand, you really want them to have good manners, right? So like you take them into a situation where you want them to be perfectly still, perfectly calm and perfectly polite until it's time to be excited, and then to be off the wall excited, ready to rip across a field or through a lake or across a river or whatever you got. Okay, and so it's important when you're working with a young dog to understand that they're not privy to the picture that you've painted in your mind. Okay, and so they can get a little bit confused as to whether it's appropriate to be excited or it's appropriate to be calm, and it takes a lot of experience. And when I say a lot of experience, I mean experience in real life situations for the dog to understand how being calm, attentive, and polite is what leads to the fun and exciting stuff. Okay? That's why you see so many dogs that are kind of whiny in the field and get corrected, but like they're 3, 4, 5 years old and still wearing some type of corrective collar to control their whining and edginess. Okay? It's because they've kind of fallen into a negative attention-seeking pattern where like they're edgy, then they get in trouble and they have to sit there and correction, correction. Finally, they calm down a little bit, and then something good happens and they get to run and retrieve. So a lot of dogs, you know, inadvertently get raised to think that they just go into a field, they get in trouble a bunch of times, and then fun stuff happens. Okay, and we're trying to avoid all that. And that's why we, number one, run the edge off of them when we first come out here, right? I'm not gonna put myself in a situation where I start to work on like noise desensitization, okay, or equipment desensitization, or other dogs in the environment desensitization with a dog that's full of energy. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have George stay up here in this part of the lane, and all he's gonna do the first few times is he's just gonna use our dummy launcher without a dummy. He's just gonna like shoot it, right? Okay, and then we'll get the shotgun out. We'll probably shoot that a few times. But this is just basically our first exercise is having Henry sit and be still while he listens to this noise. Okay, after 2 or 3 reps of that, we'll probably put the dummy on here and we'll shoot the dummy and we'll let No Name go get the dummy, but Henry's still gonna have to be still. Now, we're working, like I said, primarily on manners today, but a weird thing is that, you know, if I do this on a rotating schedule, like so on Monday, I work on Henry being still, Tuesday, work on him being still, and Wednesday, I let him fetch. Those 2 days of having to be still, having to be calm, attentive, and polite while the other dogs are running around while No Name is retrieving, it builds his desire for the activity, okay? So, and I know this is kind of getting off in the weeds, but a lot of times, like if you're really bought into this idea that obedience leads to freedom, the sessions where you're denying the dog access to the things they want actually ends up working to your advantage in terms of building drive. Okay, but it doesn't cause the traditional problem of the dog being whiny and edgy, because we're not really trying to correct the dog into being good. We're putting him in a situation where he's tired enough to be good on his own. All right, I'm gonna show you how that works. Okay, so now we have moved over to the field adjacent to the sunflower field. I positioned my bucket by this big round hay bale here, and I have a shooter stationed on the point of that wood line between my hay bale, my shooting station, and the sunflower field. Now, come over here for a second. I want to show you guys something that's pretty important. You'll notice these dogs are kind of digging around over here in this area. Well, what this area is this is where I took my boots and I made sure to loosen up and get rid of all the stobs that was going to make it hard for my dog to sit beside my bucket. You'd be surprised at how many people have, like, you know, had situations where they were unhappy with their dog because their dog wouldn't maintain a sit in a field that had been bush hogged. But a lot of times what's going on is you're asking your dog to sit and you don't really think about it, but take your hand and put it down in this field. I don't know if it'll show up on the camera, but everywhere, let me see if I can pull one out here. Everywhere that the bush hoggers went over, there's all these stops, right? And then when you're asking your dog to sit, this is going right up his behind, you know? So some people will carry a mat around with them. I'm already carrying enough stuff that I don't want to carry a mat, but I will take my boot and I'll scuff up the ground beside my bucket so that when I ask my dog to sit, come here, nerd, he's got a nice, comfortable place to sit, and he doesn't have any stalbs, you know, getting him in his behind. All right, so I'm just gonna sit here like this. The cameraman can pivot out in front, and so you can watch this dog's reaction. Now I'm gonna take my leash and I'm gonna move it up high on his neck at the base of his skull so I have good control of him if he tries to break. And all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna signal my shooter, and when I signal my shooter, he's going to fire the dummy launcher. And while he's firing the dummy launcher, No Name and Bunsen and those guys, they're gonna run around over there and try to see what happens. And he just has to sit here and be calm, attentive, and polite. Now what's going through his mind is that this is really unfair. And that's kind of the point of this lesson, is to teach this dog that life's not fair. You don't always get to do exactly what you want to do at that very moment. Okay, all right, so I'm gonna signal my shooter again. Now see, I got a little bit of a break, so I had to stop him and remind him that he couldn't just get up and go when he wanted to go. Sit here. Always remember, guys, like there's no quick fixes with dog training. Good off-leash dog training comes from good on-leash dog training, and good on-leash dog training really boils down to the one finger rule. You know, can you put a leash on a dog and then walk them or control them with the amount of pressure it takes for the leash to hang freely on one finger, okay? And if you're not there yet, then don't be telling your dog what to do when it doesn't have a leash on at all. Okay, so I'm here, I have control. If the dog goes to break, I have my, very nice. Now for some labs, you can really make some big inroads with them by periodically rewarding them for being calm, attentive, and polite. Very nice. Sit back down. And so now kind of what happened there is the big reward actually would be Henry getting to get up from this spot and go chase the retrieving item, okay? But today we're not gonna give him any big rewards, okay? That doesn't mean we're not gonna reward him, it's just not gonna be exactly what he wants. So he's gonna have to kind of settle for what we call a small reward, okay? Just a little bit of food work. Now, it's not that he's sitting here just for that food. He's kind of sitting here because he has to sit here, but the food work is a physical representation of my pleasure with his behavior. And over time, he's gonna learn that making me happy is what leads to him getting to do all the fun stuff that he wants to do. All right, now I'm gonna pick up my bucket and I'm gonna walk back over to the side-by-side, and then we're gonna go to the pond and we're gonna work on a little bit of canoeing. Now you'll notice when I got up, okay, he did pretty well, right? But when I got up, it started moving. He thought he was gonna run over there and start looking for the bumper off of the dummy launcher, okay? What did I do? I didn't fuss, I didn't make a big deal. I just kind of stopped and said, well, that's not what we're doing today. And we're gonna go back to walking. Because you might be out in a situation where the other guys are having quite a bit better luck than you, and your dog just has to listen to Gunfire, and it has to understand that there's not gonna be much in the way of access to the things that are falling out of the sky, and that's really tough on a dog that's bred, you know, to retrieve all day. I mean, you're taking a dog and you're saying, like, I love the fact that you like to retrieve, but then you're putting him in a situation where if you're not the one shooting the birds, he doesn't get to retrieve, and that's a lesson that needs to be taught before you go to the field, okay? So if I need a little bit of extra control over him as I go to walk to the side-by-side, I'm just gonna switch my leash to an improvised halter, and that way if he takes off and starts to be rude, it'll make his head a little bit, make him a little bit uncomfortable, and he'll go back to walking politely on the leash. Very nice. Very good dog. All right, now we finally made it back over to the pond. So we're gonna get in the pond, work a little bit on Henry's canoe manners, which translate pretty well to other types of watercraft. Sometimes we bring the paddle board, sometimes we use the canoe, and we have a John boat right over there on the bank. Now you'll notice that I'm in my waders right now because I want to have the ability to like influence the dog if he starts to get out. There's a lot of people over there in the field. There's a bunch of dogs running around. Come on, Henry. Come on, nerd. You can do it. And so, like, he doesn't necessarily want to get in this canoe and wait, you know, doing boring stuff while everybody else is having fun. So I fully expect for him to maybe, you know, not want to settle down and jump out a few times. So I think the biggest problem with dog training usually is people have inappropriate timelines. They think that like you just start doing a technique and the next thing you know, everything's perfect. And that's just not how the dog business works. You know, you need to break everything up into bite-sized pieces, you know, and really like spend time getting each element right. You know, so I just put him in the canoe. I'm gonna move the canoe around. And when I'm pretty sure that he's gonna be chill in the canoe, then I'll get in there with him. And I'll start moving the canoe down to the other end of the pond. Very nice. Okay. Now I'm gonna get in the kayak or the canoe with him. Oh. And we're gonna get to moving around a little bit. And then while we're moving around, the other dogs will probably kind of follow us along the bank. And then we get down here to the other end of the pond, I'll either switch the dogs out or I'll get all the dogs in here together. Very nice. Good job. Good dog. All right, so we've made it to the far end of the pond and Henry is settled in very nicely to the canoe. And this is the part where you'll start to kind of take things for granted and think that your dog has perfect manners. So right as they start to get settled, every session, you want to practice going right up to the bank line, pausing, and then going back into the water, okay? If you always go back to the boat dock and get out, or if you always go to the bank line and get out, then a lot of times your pup will start to anticipate getting out of the canoe and seeing whatever is up there. You know, a lot of times that's where the people are. A lot of times that's where this family is. And so they want to get out, you know, and they think that you've brought them up to the bank to get out. And instead of, you know, waiting for a real life situation where the dog hops out, knocks stuff over, I just practice. It's really what everything boils down to, guys, is set up your scenarios and practice. And so multiple times during my canoeing or kayaking sessions, I will go to the bank just with my paddle. I'll paddle up and then I'll paddle back. And then sometimes I like to get out, and I like to practice physically pulling my canoe or kayak. And the reason I like to do this is because a lot of places where we go, like in the summertime, the water gets really low. And so you have to get out and you have to kind of pull your canoe or your kayak through the shallow areas. Well, like, look, if I've got a bunch of people with me and everybody has a dog, it's enough trouble to be dragging the kayaks and the canoes along. I don't want to have to be chasing dogs everywhere, and I don't want to have to be dealing with people that got dumped out of their canoe or kayak because their dog jumped out of the way, you know? All right, so we'll get just a few repetitions of pushing and pulling. Very nice. Then I'll walk up to the bank. I'll actually bring the canoe up onto the bank like I'm gonna leave it there. Tell him to stay. I'll walk away and then I'll come back. And of course, every day I add a little bit of time, distance, and distraction to that part of the exercise. And the next thing you know, if you get in your canoe or you get in your kayak and you have forgotten something in the truck, well, look, just pull up to the bank and tell your dog to stay, run up to your truck, get out of your truck, and then you come back. Your dog's waiting patiently there for you, and you can get on with your business. All right, now we're gonna head back down the way and see if we can find Henry's friends. And let him go to having some fun up on the bank. Because remember how we always like to structure this stuff, guys. We like to structure it so, turn around so they can see you. We like to structure this stuff in a way where the obedience always leads to the fun stuff. You don't want to ever have a session where like it's all about telling the dog what not to do and never what to do. Okay, so what we try to do is we always try to draw a direct line between self-control, between being calm, attentive, and polite, and getting to have fun, right? And once that line is established, then the dog doesn't mind sitting in the canoe or the kayak or the hunting boat or beside the hay bale, because they know if they'll sit there and wait patiently, then something really good's gonna happen. Okay, so in this case, this dog has been really good today. He was really good following us around the sunflower field. He was really good when we were doing the shooting exercises, and he's been really good in the side-by-side. And we finish off the day with a nice, trip around the pond in the canoe. Okay, and then when I finally get back up to the bank by the truck and let him go, he's off work for the rest of the evening. I'm not going to boss him, not one bit. Okay, and that's really important that you guys understand that you have to balance out all the stuff that you tell the dog with stuff that the dog really enjoys. If you're going to ask the dog to be under control, you have to make them realize that being under control leads to freedom in the long run. In other words, if they will accept a lack of autonomy for a certain amount of time during the day, then that guarantees them greater autonomy at other times during the day. Okay? All right, well, I'm going to go down here and find these other dogs, and I will see you guys next week. Very nice. You're a fine animal.